Thank you for joining us. My name is Gordon Feller. Good morning to you in North America. Good afternoon in Europe. Good evening in the rest of the world. I'm here in San Francisco, and I'm going to serve as your moderator today for a special program presented by the World Smart City Forum. First, a bit of background about the forum. This is an initiative jointly organized and sponsored and presented to you by 3 international organizations based in Geneva. The International Standards Organization, which is a UN agency, the International Telecommunications Union, a sister UN agency, and the initiator of this effort among the 3, the International Electrotechnical Commission, also based in Geneva. This year, the World Smart City Forum during these coming months, the World Smart City Forum will go through some upgrade and changes, and you should stay tuned as you learn more about where we're heading in the coming cycle. But I will say that the International Standards Organization is going to be taking the lead among the 3 organizations for a special event that will convene in mid-November in Barcelona, and we'll be upgrading this community platform that you see on the website, where we convene these hangouts and provide blogging and other opportunities for exchange of ideas among leaders who've been invited to participate in a debate, really, and that's what we're doing today, a debate about the future of smart cities. So I hope you'll follow us on Twitter, and you'll share your ideas and your comments and your suggestions and your criticisms, not just for today's program, but ongoing. The hashtag on Twitter is World Smart City 2017. I'm pleased today to be able to present to you Fred Ellermeier, who's here from Kansas City in the United States at the headquarters of Black Veatch. I'll tell you about Fred in a moment, but maybe before I introduce him, I'll introduce the organization he represents. Black Veatch is a 100-year-old engineering firm that has become the leading provider of innovative solutions to infrastructure owners and infrastructure operators. In response to a market demand for the best ways to harness the power of the world's, excuse me for a moment. Too much technology around me here. In response to the market demand for the best ways to harness the power of the world's most advanced digital tools, Black Veatch has really developed a unique approach, and that's why we asked Fred to join us today. You're going to hear about what they're doing with smart integrated infrastructure for cities and for utilities and others. But the unique element of this is they start by providing a roadmap that enables organizations like cities and utilities and telecom providers to mesh their digital networks and their digital systems with physical assets. So today, under the title Strategic Urban Infrastructure, How and Where and Why, Fred is going to describe new solutions and how it all impacts city systems. So Fred is the Vice President, Managing Director of the Black Veatch Smart Integrated Infrastructure business. And he'll tell you a bit about how they work and what they're doing and why, but they address the smart city infrastructure engineering, procurement, construction. They focus on power generation, the energy grid, water systems, and all of the operational analytics and advanced predictive analytics that are necessary for those to succeed, those infrastructure assets to succeed in a very complex environment. Before leading the smart integrated infrastructure business at Black Veatch, Fred held a number of management and innovation development positions, and he has had 25 years of experience working as an expert in developing not just new markets and new solutions, but creating business growth at Black Veatch. So we're really pleased to have you, Fred. Thank you so much for putting your time and effort into the presentation we're about to see. And anybody who's joining us on the YouTube channel, we just want you to know that we won't take your questions on audio. We'll only take them via the Twitter feed and your comments. So keep those comments and questions coming. I already see a few of them, and Fred will leave some time after his presentation before the top of the hour. So Fred, the floor is yours, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Gordon. It's a pleasure to be hanging out with you today. This is a nice opportunity to get the message out, and the idea of strategic urban infrastructure and the questions of how and where and why. Those are really big questions. We're going to take some bite-sized chunks on those today. We're going to point out a few places to get some more resources. But we hope to make a nice push towards helping define where we are as a society, where we are globally, and kind of where we can go from here. So I'm ready to charge into this. As we look at, I'm going to go ahead and show some slides here. As we look at this question of how and where and why, I think it first serves to take a look at where we are right now. And so as we think about the smart city landscape, it's really that definition of smart cities today. I think of it as, in terms of that snapshot. Where are we this date in September of 2017? And to think about that, there are just a few industry observations that we have. And, you know, there's what I kind of think of as the shifting sands. Even in some places, some confusion about smart cities, where to start. I think the IEC would be the first to know and be on top of and be leading the effort around the idea, the thought that there's a lack of good standards. Cities aren't always certain where to start, and those are being worked on. And that's part of the exciting aspect of this, is that we as a smart city community have the opportunity to say, what's coming next? Where do we go from here? So before I get to our approach, just thinking about what cities are going through at the moment. There are so many different areas that demand their attention, and then they get asked questions, and the pressure to go build this idea of a smart city. And, you know, every city is starting from a different place, a different fingerprint of a city. And so they have to answer that question of what is our plan, where are we going? And what we've seen, what we've observed globally, is that there's really the advanced cities that are taking these first steps, that are looking, searching, trying to set their own kind of path of where this smart city development will go. There are others that are waiting, kind of sitting on the sideline and trying to find out what lessons are going to be learned as they go forward. And with the cities that are moving forward, we see two really kind of categories of primary approach. We see cities that are planning. They're pulling in the ecosystem that's available to them in industry and coming up with plans, call them roadmaps. And where do we go? What are the first steps we ought to take? What's our landing point? What's a good intermediate step? Where should we end up in 2, 5, 10 years from now? We see other cities, really the ones that are under pressure to show progress, the ones that are trying to demonstrate projects. And we see those cities in that second category really just conducting a lot of pilot projects, some tests, some testing sites, checking out technology, seeing if they work, seeing if they pay off. So those are really the kinds of approaches that we see occurring so far. So what approach would Black Veatch recommend? And when I say our approach, I want to make it really clear that Black Veatch is working across that ecosystem that I mentioned, kind of an ecosystem of partnerships, we sometimes call it, in a collaborative way. Sometimes we're leading, sometimes we're following, sometimes we're walking in shoulder to shoulder. But when I talk about the Black Veatch approach, please know that it's an approach that is working alongside many of the biggest technology companies in the world, a lot of startups. We value highly that startup community, where a lot of innovation is going on, co-working spaces. And so that's why we call it the ecosystem, because it isn't just big companies coming together and trying to solve problems. It really is pulling ideas from across the landscape. So that's an important distinction to know when we talk about what approach should a city take or a community take. It's really the advice of a larger body of organizations coming together. So what are these smart city, next-gen communities going to look like is a question that I think many have, and a question that deserves to be answered. What we would recommend and come to you with is thinking about the foundation of what you have as a community. What is your physical infrastructure? What is that fingerprint of your community? Starting points, endpoints, and then setting those intermediate steps in between. We see sometimes being left out are those core ingredients. And when I talk about the core ingredients, I think in terms of the three primary layers of a smart city. That first layer is the infrastructure layer. What is your base infrastructure? How much intelligence do you have built in it? Is it sensorized? Do you have smart control systems? What is that foundational infrastructure across your water, energy, transportation, and other city services and community services functions? First layer is an extremely important layer that has to be addressed, and is often what is gathering a lot of the attention of city leaders and the staff and the people, the leaders that make up each and every community. The middle layer is one that can also often get neglected. Sometimes we want to jump straight from the infrastructure to the data layer, the top layer, but nothing works without a strong, core, broad communications layer. What is your telecommunications layer that transmits data? And that's one that deserves a lot of focus, should not be forgotten, and should be a key component of every roadmap that's created and every master plan that's thought about. And then of course, that data layer, taking in every aspect of what's available today, from the data analytics, what can be done with dashboards, what is your citizen experience as they access the data that's made available to them, and the city leaders and those operating and maintaining the cities. How are they able to use cities to be more sustainable, more resilient, more efficient? And those three layers are what brought together are transforming cities. So it's really, as shown on the screen, it's that application of advanced information and communication technologies, collecting, analyzing data that improves the design and operation of cities' systems. And it is really about closing that divide, making this accessible to all citizens. And that's hard, but that's what's required to truly be a smart city. It's not data and accessibility to a few, it's accessibility to all. And that's really where smart cities are headed. And in every case, when you're assessing your progress in your city, of how well that's being done, it really has to include those three layers pointed at that end objective. So graphically speaking, this is a way we like to look at what it takes to bring about a smart city. And you can make this particular diagram more and more complex as you think about all the infrastructure, communications, and data analytics and data use that comes along. But it really is meant to depict that synergizing of the different systems. And this is an area where I think as we look into it, as we delve into it, we often get asked the question, who's the smartest city around? And what we have to remember is every city has a different starting point. Most cities are going to have a different endpoint. And it isn't a matter of who's the smartest. It's a matter of how are cities addressing these issues? What is their ultimate outcome? And what are they doing in the area of energy reliability? How do we make sure everyone has safe water systems, both water treatment and wastewater treatment, for the health and well-being of our citizens? Mobility is huge. The whole transportation sector is one that's being impacted faster than just about any other sector in the area of mobility, in the area of smart cities. But yet we can look around ourselves and see the immense traffic congestion and the difficulty of getting, being mobile and getting from point A to point B, and that first and last mile that really chokes our largest cities is one of the biggest problems that has to be addressed. The built environment, the social systems, how do people connect and communicate? Certainly the economic systems. What are the finance companies and structures, and how are they being impacted by technology? So all those pieces and the others that you can think of in a model like this have to be brought together, have to have a common source of data, have to have common planned outcomes for this data. And you do that through, as you go progressively inside of this diagram, you have to connect, you have to measure, you have to analyze, and then you have to act on that data. And the ones I would point out today are connecting, that connectivity layer, the telecommunications layer, and how that information is being transmitted from point A to point B, but then also that analysis layer. How are we using data systems? How are dashboards and other forms of reporting being shared and accessed? And so we're all working on a single set of information. So bringing these components together, making sure it's connected and secure, the plans and roadmaps. We really would always encourage cities and communities to be thinking in terms of plans and roadmaps so that they can bring these constituents together, can bring these stakeholders together, and pull in the thoughts and the insight from the community, the broader community, and be on the same plan, communicating that plan in a clear and concise fashion. And it really does then come down to how these key systems become more integral, efficient, and resilient. And so this is really that core of data systems. So of a smart city, and how this data gets generated, transmitted, and then utilized. I'll point out here that in addition to the long, as Gordon said, 100-year history of Black Veatch being a construction and engineering company that includes all of these core functions of energy and water and mobility and so forth, we also do bring a high-end data analytics platform that meshes very well with other data sorting and control system data platforms. And we like to point out our Asset 360 products because they are the ones that are providing that high-end evaluation. They provide a big math function that allows large data sets to be processed and beneficial outcomes to be developed out of the data and then communicated clearly through rich data analytics. And so we point to our Asset 360 platform as an advanced system that's really helping in the utility and community setting to better access these data systems. So as I proceed in this conversation, really trying to paint the broader picture, we like to help our clients in a lot of different ways, in cities and communities in a lot of different ways. And one of the things that we've been doing is a series of reports. We call it our strategic directions reports, and we do this in several different industry sectors. You'll see the website there on the screen where you can access all of these reports going back to the very beginning of when they started. I think about 5 years ago is when this reporting, 5 or 6 years ago when this reporting started. And we do this every year, and it's not only valuable in the information provided each year, but the relative changes that go on in the thoughts of cities. So we go out and we talk to cities, and we ask them questions, and we get them to provide us with their thoughts on where different things are going. And one of the reports that we've been creating is the Smart City, Smart Utility report. And in the 2017 report that's available now, we got input from 740 different constituents to find out in the smart city area and smart community area to find out their thoughts of what they're planning, what have they been spending their money on and investing their resources into. Where do they plan to go in the future? So I'm going to point out in the next few minutes just a few of the results that we've gleaned from this report that we've created. And I encourage every one of you to go take a deeper dive into these reports and this particular report that I think will help us as a community to better understand what it is that cities are thinking. What are they struggling with? What do they need help with and answers to? So one of the things we asked is, what are you participating in the smart city area? What are the things that you're working on? And creating a plan and a roadmap got 32% of those polled responded to this, saying they were doing a plan or a roadmap. 27% said piloting or projects. So as I mentioned earlier, those are really the two starting points that cities are using. We noted that from the 2 years ago, that there was a 34% increase from the 2015 report in cities reporting and communities reporting that they are creating plans and roadmaps. So that's a big increase. A lot of communities understanding the need to better develop these plans and roadmaps. And we're very pleased to hear that. We also like to see cities out sampling and trying new things and putting things in the ground, so to speak, to try out new technologies. And with 27 reporting, that was a 26% increase from 2015. So interesting to see those trends, interesting to see from several years ago when we even had respondents saying, I don't think smart cities will ever get here. You know, today, more and more and more cities are understanding that it's either here and now or it's in their new future. I wanted to point out just a few other results. So what are the most critical building blocks of a smart community? We asked that question, and we were pleased to see that integrated data management systems was the number one area. That smart city plan and roadmap was number two, a close number two. Automation control systems was very important. So you can see down this list of what kinds of answers we were getting when we asked what are the most critical building blocks. So some interesting information there. We also asked what are the, let's see, slides in that. There was the graph on the most critical building blocks. So there's the data that I mentioned. We also asked what are the primary drivers of smart city initiatives, and we received a response from more than half saying that it was about efficiency and reducing operating costs. And that was not a surprise at all. We've seen that as an increasing message and mantra from communities saying that has to be core. It isn't just about being labeled as smart. It really is about getting that return on the investment and showing the results and being able to go show the citizens and the constituents that really are, that the cities and communities really are getting an impact by the investment of smart cities. So efficiency and operating costs were really have continued to really be primary in this area. We're also glad to see that quality of service component is very important to cities. They want to be better. They want to do better. They run large organizations, and it's important that they have customer satisfaction, per se. Certainly, environmental resource sustainability was another key driver pointed out, and that's also very good to see that the area of protecting our environment, being sustainable, has to be, we all know, has to be a primary driver for this area of smart cities. We asked, well, what would you invest in first? Where do you go? Where do you start? And it was interesting to see that the electric grid was number one. Data networks was number 2. Smart water, smart transportation, and smart buildings were right after those answers. And those are interesting. It's interesting to see the kind of what the responses were as opposed to what we see cities actually doing. And this is an area where we don't see 100% alignment. So when a city leader sits down, a city manager or a chief innovation officer sits down to respond to our survey, we get a little bit different answer from what they say is important to what we see many of the cities actually doing. And I don't think that's a matter of deception, but I do think it really rolls up into what's that earlier mentioned return on investment for what they're going to go do. It's where can we, the low-hanging fruit idea, where can we go make a quick set of improvements that give us early progress and demonstratable progress. So it's also interesting to see that there's some middle ground here where we see private industry stepping in and being the ones to work on things like smart transportation and smart building systems. So it becomes that ecosystem of both public and private coming together to develop these smart cities and hit these most important areas. So there's some interesting things to be drawn, and I'll point out another one just because it shows that the trends from year over year. So this graph shows what was the responses from a year ago in the black on the top bar, and it shows the responses this year in the blue at the bottom bar. And long-term vision, proactive government was the #1 answer to what are the major forces driving the adoption of smart technologies and smart data analytics. So we really drove into that question of, how are you using technology? What are the major forces driving that technology? And proactive governance has always been a high answer and continues to increase, and that's good to see. I think it's good to see cities express that good governance is a major force as they make investments and plan and develop their cities. Not surprisingly, cost pressure is there. Resiliency, not surprising, has been high, but it's interesting to see that resiliency programs actually dropped. A lot of attention went to those prior to in the area of good governance and cost pressure. We do watch things like what's going on globally in the area of natural disasters and how that's impacting the world around us. And certainly here in the United States, there's been a lot of talk about the tragic loss that's occurred through a very damaging hurricane season, and globally, certainly similarly, that there are natural disasters impacting communities around the world. And so we do watch these kinds of numbers, these kinds of responses of what's garnering the attention, and really trying to steer in the right direction. Never forgetting that resiliency should really always be one of the top concerns and top forces driving this, because it is that area that impacts many people, but often it impacts the poor before it impacts others who are able to get to safety or to build safer systems. So we would encourage and lead and plan around the idea that resiliency remains a high priority in all of the city development areas. And then finally from the report, just one more here. We don't want to miss the point that the belief that it's gone beyond belief. It's gotten to the point of I'm convinced that every problem in the world today that can be solved through a digital solution will be solved through a digital solution. More and more and more, because we can measure and monitor, because we can communicate and get good data connections, and because we have access to big data analytics and good rich graphical interface, that idea that we can get benefits out of analytics solutions and the area of dashboarding. It was interesting to ask the question of what are those perceived benefits? And you see that the results were that a lot are not actually using them very well. And they admit that. They say, yes, it would be beneficial. The blue 38.6%, but they still haven't fully developed out a good, rich data analytics capability and ability to view their data in a beneficial way. Some are reporting good use, 18, almost 1 in 5 reporting that they have dashboards and the ability to use and beneficially apply data analytics. But that's not enough. And that's an area that we would like to see grow and help. Not just measuring, monitoring, not just getting the data communicated, but getting it out there in a beneficial way. So to summarize some of the key observations, there is a momentum and a better understanding of this smart city movement. Most would agree that this is something that's here and now and will be a part of our future. We see a shift towards understanding that good planning, that the ability to pull together systems approach, a multiple systems approach, is what's going to lead to the most success. That whole idea of an integrated approach, that idea that stronger data analytics are needed, certainly clear. And then, of course, the idea that communications network and backbone is what many cities lack, but is going to be the opportunity that cities have. And I think about parts of the world that are underdeveloped, that are still working on the major building blocks of a city, much less a smart city. And this is where there's really opportunity, and this is something we're very interested in. How do you leapfrog from what was an advanced built environment into a smart city state? How do we leapfrog that middle step and move developing communities into smart communities without having to go through all the intermediate steps? And that's a challenge we confront, but one that I think we address boldly and are very interested in being a part of, and bringing that ecosystem of partnerships to deploy technologies in an intelligent way that propels developing countries and communities into the smart city conversation. So just very quickly, wanted to go through a couple of scenarios. We're very proud of a report, or a planning effort that we led with the city of Chula Vista, California. This is a city that I would call a thought leader, doing really amazing things in an area that there was an opportunity for development that they were taking hold of, but they sat back and looked at the broader vision, how they could pull together not just community development, but smart community development. And they're doing it in what we believe to be the exact right way. So they're moving forward with this idea of road mapping that helps them understand the exact right steps to take. And so a consortium of companies came together, including Black Veatch and several others that you would recognize, to put together this roadmap for them as they develop out their waterfront redevelopment program across both Chula Vista, crossing over into the Port of San Diego, working together hand in hand to develop out this smart community. So there are reports written on this. It's accessible online. They have public information about a lot of the planning that's been conducted, and it really sits out there as a good example of how a community can think about the opportunity of development and do it in a way that leads to the creation of a very innovative and smart city, smart community approach.
Fred, thank you for this.
Yeah. I was just going to cover one more, Gordon.
Yes, sure,
Very
absolutely.
quickly on this one, because there is more to come. We're proud to be working with a company called Rethink Advisors. It's a strategy consultancy, one that has a new and unique and action-based approach, really purpose-driven planning around urban design, architecture, sustainability, resiliency. Rethink Advisors work across that community spectrum: universities, cities, urban institutions. And so I'm going to put in a little plug here. You can learn a whole bunch more about this people-centric approach that Rethink is taking, along with companies like Black Veatch. Meeting of the Minds in Cleveland, Ohio, October 23rd through 25th. There's going to be a panel discussion about what's going on in a few communities using this, like I said, purpose-driven approach. We're excited to be a part of that, and I would highly encourage you to attend Meeting of the Minds or access the material that will be presented here in just a little over a month. So with that, Gordon, I would like to turn it over to you.
Fred, that's great. Thank you. That's a very full half hour that you've just provided us, and I want to unpack a few of the things, but we have one question which I'll start with because I want to make sure we address the questions that have come in. This is a question that's been asked by Gabriela Ehrlich, who's based in the Geneva headquarters at the International Electrotechnical Commission. She's the global head of marketing and communications, and I'll start with her question because it's kind of a nice overview question to start with as we drill down into more detail in the remaining time we have. She asks, quote, "Do you see things moving in terms of smart city development? In your opinion, what is the one key element that needs to be in place for a city to move to greater smartness? How important would you rate access to reliable electricity for smart city development?" So maybe that's three questions, and I'll start maybe with the first part of her question. How do you see things moving in terms of smart city development? Do you see them moving fast, or fast enough, or not fast enough? Or how would you characterize the movement and the flow right now towards smart city development?
Yeah, I would very just quickly say, response to that question, that it is not moving as fast as many, Black Veatch included, were projecting a few years ago. There was a lot of hype. There was a lot of excitement about what smart cities could bring. That whole area of how and where and why is about finding the path to beneficial use of these smart city components. And I don't think that's always been well demonstrated. I think that from a lessons learned and what is this technology really going to do, there's the marketing side, but what's the reality of how this gets implemented. So I think that there'll be an exponential increase in cities that are using and deploying and getting benefit from smart cities technologies. But in response to the question, the first part of that question, it is not moving as quickly as many projected just a couple of years ago. And I think just there are a lot of cities and communities kind of on the sideline waiting to see how these benefits work out in other places, and whether or not whether or not to jump in, but when to jump in.
Well, and that leads to her second question. In your opinion, what is the one key element that needs to be in place for a city to move forward, toward becoming a smarter city? Is there one that you consider to be the highest priority of the list of elements?
That's where I would go back to the diagram that I showed, and also the idea of that three-layer model. It's hard to draw a conclusion on which one of those is most important. I think it does come down to the city itself. Which one is the most neglected? So in some places, that's going to be that base infrastructure layer. And cities really should spend their time working on safe, reliable, resilient infrastructure. And as they do that, again, that idea of planning, make sure that you're building into that the the measuring and monitoring and detection systems, sensorized systems, systems with good SCADA infrastructure and the ability to produce data. We often see, let's just use utilities as a good example. We often see they get these systems in place and they don't know what to do with all the data, that's being produced out of these systems. But that's okay, because what we know is they're going to develop good use cases for that data down the road as they develop out their communications layer, as they develop out their data analytics layer. That's where we see cities evolve to, okay, I've got my arms around the data, I know what to do with it, and then they go to a third step eventually that says, hey, wait a minute, I don't have enough data. I need to measure and monitor some things that I don't yet have. So it really is each city individually setting out a plan that looks at how well are we doing the infrastructure piece? Do we have a good communications plan? And then are we using data analytics well? And as you answer those three questions in succession, I think it's going to lead to the right answer to that question.
Well, that's a good segue to the third part of Gabriella's question, which is how important do you rate access to reliable electricity when you're looking at the criteria for smart city development?
Yeah, it's so crucial. I think the IEC says it well in a lot of what they talk about. You really can't be a smart city without good electric infrastructure, both the generation side and transmission and distribution side of things, much less coming up with good renewable and sustainable energy systems. So it's key. It's right there with water systems. Water and energy are the two areas that a community really has to be able to focus on, and where public and private organizations need to come together to bring about good, safe, and resilient electrical and water infrastructure around the world.
And can you talk a little bit about the role of the utility as a partner for the city? So some utilities, of course, are municipal owned, and so they have a very easy time pulling their or aligning their priorities and their strategies and their investments with the city. Because the city government is the owner of that municipal utility. And we saw that, for instance, in Chattanooga in the US, in the state of Tennessee. But many cities don't own their utility, or there may be more than one utility. And so the question is, when you see a success story, maybe Chula Vista or another city, is there alignment that's been developed between the utility and the city government that becomes a key factor in the success for that initiative?
Yes, indeed it does. And Black Veatch works with a lot of utilities, electric utilities, as well as others around the world. And it's a fantastic community that really does, in every case, have the best interest of the community around them in mind. And the ones who are doing it the very best are the ones that are coming together in that community mindset. And there's just some fantastic stories out there of how well that's being done, how well goals are being aligned. And yes, we could come up with areas where that's fallen through or maybe not been done well. But overwhelmingly, we see that community of electric utilities, regardless of the organizational structure, finance structure of those utilities, really having the best interest of the community around them in mind, whether they're for-profit or not-for-profit, really blends together as far as what they're doing in order to be, and really that area of resiliency, being available, and then certainly working on broader sets of problems about being sustainable and so forth. But it does take, to your point, Gordon, it takes that community coming together, being on the same page, having the same end goal in mind in order to really be sustainable. And that's, again, the reason for the diagram we put together, is to show that until those organizations are working together, working on common data sets, you really can't claim fully capable smart cities. It is necessary.
Good. That very helpful clarification. So another question comes in asking about the city-to-city learning process. This is the question, how do these smart city projects learn from each other? What forums, what reports, what else? Do you have any observations about the city-to-city cross-learning that's taking place?
Well, I know you're not looking for this in that question, but very much where we come together ends up being in places like the meeting of the minds. Places we really appreciate the work that City Age is doing, bringing together that consortium of cities and different forms of community, as well as the private sector in settings. And we're very proud to be sponsoring and working with the Meeting of the Minds to bring this thought leadership together with others that Gordon, you gather together through this effort. And I really do think those are very important. Cities that are able to participate in those kinds of forums, highly recommended, because it isn't just about the information you learn from the stage. It's often as much or more about the connections you make at those events, and whether it's during the conference or the after-hours sessions. I appreciate the using technology through this Hangout session. I think, again, working out the thought element of it, but as well the connections that can be made through these kinds of get-togethers. So
good.
Very important.
Yeah, thanks for the plug. And I'll say, as far as the Cleveland program is concerned, one of the things that we're doing this year is a whole afternoon dedicated to getting out of the conference center and into the city of Cleveland to see the innovations that are at work around water, around smart streets, around connected mobility. There are 10 of these that will essentially help the participants, 425 some odd people from 10, 12 different countries who are gathering there in October to really look at what are the options and how can they learn from those cities. The question that just came in about learning from cities, in this case Barcelona, I don't know if you have a perspective about Barcelona or maybe another European city where the questioner asks, what projects should we look out for in Barcelona when we're there? Because the World Smart City Forum is going to be convening a program in mid-November there. The questioner asks, what can we learn from this city? And if you don't have anything per se in Barcelona to point to, maybe there's another city in Europe that you think might have an outstanding project that's worth looking at more closely.
Yeah, well, I do have a little bit to say about Barcelona. They're a great example of a city that has done very good planning. But what they've done that we commend highly is their data portal, their efforts to make data available. I mentioned the innovation and startup communities around the world, and this is an area where you can bring out some of the best from those kinds of companies, in addition to larger companies that are working on use of data and how do you triangulate data to come up with unique and beneficial use cases. So Barcelona has been one of those cities that's really leveraged that open data function very well. They have other smart city deployments underway, which I can't come up with their exact programs off the top of my head, but those are certainly available online. And as we've looked around Barcelona, some of their smart street lighting and smart camera technologies have been, along with some other cities, done very well. I know London and Bristol, the UK, have both been commended as having kind of led the way. In the UK, there's some reporting out there available on how well they've done to, again, plan and begin to execute some smart city platforms. So those are the ones I can think of off the top of my head.
Good. And maybe while we're on the subject of what can we learn from cities, can you talk a little bit about what Kansas City either Kansas City, Missouri or Kansas City, Kansas are doing that you think people might want to investigate a little further, that stands out in your mind as, you know, a particularly innovative approach to making the streets smarter, making the traffic flow more smoothly, making the public safety more readily available, or any of the other areas where either one of the two Kansas cities are making headway?
Yeah, so Kansas City, Missouri would be a very good example of a group of cities, and I'll just name a few. San Jose, California. I was going to name another one. Let me think about that for a second. Who have made, well, New York City. I think New York City itself makes a good example as well. Making city infrastructure available to others, to public and private entities, in order to come up with good, beneficial use of smart city systems. Chicago, Illinois would be another good example of a city that's saying, use our infrastructure and help us become more intelligent. And in Kansas City, as you mentioned, that's been done through a first phase that has included smart street lighting, that includes intelligent video systems, camera systems. It includes the digital connected kiosks. It includes public Wi-Fi, and it does include, out of all that, an open data portal. And so, of those U.S. cities that I just mentioned, I think they're going down the right path of how do we as a city, as a community, make valuable assets available that can bring in new types of either efficiency or revenue streams. That's one of the maybe biggest hidden secrets out there right now, is that cities can open up their infrastructure for beneficial use, and that can even include revenue streams or new sources of revenue into the city through the use of new technologies for beneficial use. That can even include revenue sources of revenue into the city through the use of city technologies for beneficial use.
That helps a lot. Thank you, Fred. One more question has emerged, and this may take us to the top of the hour, and it's really a question about alignment. So you've got this number one item on the survey that you did, which, if I remember correctly, was major forces list that you showed in your slide. Long-term vision / proactive governance was the top performing or top rated among the major forces list in your survey. So the question that's been asked is this: as governance changes and technology changes, those two sometimes are not fully aligned with each other. And the question is whether the data is going to help facilitate that alignment. And as cities become more sophisticated in using the data that's available from these smart infrastructure assets that are being made more intelligent, is there a way that the governance system of the city, led by elected and appointed leaders, can use that data to make the city more agile, make it smarter about how it invests? Is that the end goal, or is that one of the goals here, that there should be greater alignment between the way the city is governed and the way the infrastructure behaves or is improved or is managed?
Yeah, that's a good full question. And the answer is yes. Really pointing out something I said earlier, that everything that can be solved through a digital solution will be solved through a digital solution. Maybe you can do a Hangout that has a debate on that question, but I'm convinced that that's absolutely the case. And I would be on the side of that question or that argument that says that's how we're going to access our environment around us more and more. As connectivity increases, you think about what's going to happen when we go 3G to 4G to now 5G connectivity. the whole world changes around us as we have that kind of communication speed. And then when you combine with that, all of the sensing going on, and think about all of the sensing going on, from smart thermostats in the home to Alexa devices and Siri and those kinds of bots, if you will. Think about all the data being created. Think about the ability to communicate faster than we've ever dreamed of before. And then think about what can be done through, today it would be through a handheld device. Who knows what that device or that access is going to be like in the future, as we think about Google Glass and other technologies, embedded wearable technologies. So how does that impact a city? How we access our city, how we are mobile within our environment, how the city communicates to us, whether thinking of safety and security concerns, cybersecurity concerns, entertainment, all of the things that our cities provide for us. As you apply them, or as you overlay that communications and available data component, things that we've not even dreamed of yet are going to be available to us. And every one of the problems we have are going to have a component or a complete solution from digital platforms. So that's the exciting part of it. Going back to one of the very earliest parts of this particular discussion, there are cities sitting on the sidelines on this very question, waiting to see what happens, waiting for some good standards, waiting to find out what lessons are learned, what worked and what didn't work, what was a good investment, what was a bad investment. And as those lessons are learned and as those areas are discovered, the adoption rate is going to explode, and it's going to be exponential. It's going to be everywhere. The compelling force. You think about, guys our age, Gordon, can remember before we had smartphones. Well, did we need a smartphone? Was it something that would be around very long? And the moment it was clear in our minds that it was a beneficial device that helped us navigate our day, get our work done, we bought in. And that's the kind of adoption we're going to see in smart cities. We're going to see that cascading movement. And it is going to address this area of governance and good government that we're talking about.
Well, that's a good way to end this on an optimistic, positive note about the future of government, since this is, of course, a pretty intense debate in the United States, what role government can and should play. I will maybe wrap up with a few suggested take-home assignments for people. First, of course, is to access the report that you were referencing, the Black Veatch Strategic Directions report, including the one 2017 Smart City, Smart Utility. This is all available at your website, fredbv.com/reports. And we want to encourage people to look at those and study more in detail, since you only gave us a snapshot and there's a lot of depth to those reports. So thanks to your team for putting that together. And we also want to encourage people to look at the World Smart City Forum. The community platform is being relaunched shortly. There'll be obviously a continuing stream of blogs on that site. We welcome comments from people on not just our Twitter feed and Facebook page, but also on the new community forum site itself, where the three sponsoring organizations, the International Standards Organization, the International Telecommunications Union, and the International Electrotechnical Commission, those three Geneva-based organizations are working hard, not just to pull together the new community platform online at worldsmartcity.org, but also in mid-November in Barcelona at the special event that's convening there during Smart Cities Expo. But we'll have Black Veatch sharing a lot more depth in Cleveland on October 23 evening through October 25 evening. And we'll have multiple participants from Black Veatch, but also some of your partners who will be there as well, including Bob Bennett, the Chief Innovation Officer of the Kansas City, Missouri city government, who's been leading the charge around smart integrated infrastructure for the city government in Kansas City. So I'll say this at the top of the hour. We've had a really interesting chance to look inside, one of the world's great engineering and construction companies. under your belt working with utilities and cities, and we're all benefiting from the insights that you've gained in that process. And what I would say is this will be posted on YouTube. It'll be accessible through the World Smart City Forum's own website. We'll be continuing to tweet about these themes in perpetuity, forever, I guess. And the point I'll make here is that there'll be an upcoming blog about what Chicago is doing, since you referenced this Chicago array of things, as they call it, which is their smart integrated infrastructure initiative in the city of Chicago. The mayor and his team have put a lot of resources and energy behind it. And in a few days, the Meeting of the Minds blog site will have an article, a blog contribution from one of the founders and designers of that, who actually comes to this from the world of design and art, and who was recruited by the mayor to help think about what should the physical assets be on the street that will help collect that data, and that your type of analytics tools and the integrated analytics platform that you've developed could really understand better. Because the one takeaway, big takeaway that I'm taking from you today is all of that data that's streaming in and around and through the city's infrastructure assets. If we really are smart, we'll figure out what jewels, what gems we can extract from those that would be actionable insights that will help us manage and improve our infrastructure and deliver better services to citizens and visitors of these cities. So on that note, I'll say thanks, Fred. Thanks to your team at Black Veatch. Thanks to Sylvia and her team in the UK for producing this event. And we're at the top of the hour, signing off on time. So thanks again to you, Fred, and to everybody there. We'll see you soon. Enjoyed this very much. Thank you.